Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Gig. I'm your host, Mike Redman. This is the podcast where we share strategies, stories, and insider tips that can help you thrive in an ever-changing music industry. So if you're serious about turning your passion into a career, make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button right now so you'll never miss an episode. Okay, that was my shameless plug. Today I'm excited to welcome Katy McIlvaine, a talented music supervisor who just wrapped the acclaimed horror film, The Front Room. In this episode, Katy shares her thoughts about the art of music supervision, collaboration, and her company, Dawn Patrol Music. She's also an avid rock climber. So whether you're a composer, a band looking to get your music into film, or just somebody fascinated by the behind-the-scenes world of soundtracks, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Don't wait, subscribe now, and as always, let's jump right in. Well, hi, Katy. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well too, and I'm very happy to have you here on Gig. And I was telling you earlier, I love your last name, McIlvaine. It means that we're from sort of the same part of the world. And my wife would say when I met her, I told her I was a Viking, and then she finally found out and said, "No, that's bullshit." Okay, but anyway, so. We keep this light. I want people to get to know you a little bit, what you do. And so I'm going to start with a really, really easy question.
Okay.
Tell me what it is you love about music.
What I love about music is I don't know if this is the right phrasing, but it's not that the music has an ability, but there is something about music that makes me feel ways that nothing else does. Songs move me to tears. A painting never has. And, I know it does for other people, but for me, the thing that hits my heart is music.
That's a great answer. And I won't talk too much because I've been known to do that. But it's interesting you say that. Now, going back to our heritage, the first time that I heard real Irish music and a Julian pipes, it brought me to tears, and I didn't know why. I figured out later it must be in my DNA or something. I don't know. So that's a great explanation. I have a lot of music supervisor friends, and we talk about all sorts of subjects. And this is kind of a little different than normal, but would you talk about the importance of, how you collaborate with the director and composer and the editor on a project?
Well, personally, I think it's different every time. I mean, everybody comes to the table with a different creative background. So for me, it's really about, getting myself into the place that I need to be for that dynamic, whatever it may be. And just because of who I am, I probably try and over educate on the music supervision side, but I want to make sure that everybody, has a full understanding of like the context in which I'm coming to them, because I oftentimes have to kind of be the bad guy of like, sorry, you can't do that. You can't have that song. And so, I want to always try and set people up to win so that, when I have to say we can't do something, it's in a constructive way so that we can kind of still know that, with the director, like their vision is still the number one priority, and we're going to figure out a way to get their vision, even if it has to be through another method.
Oh, that's cool. It just reminded me of a phrase that somebody said, just to kind of make sure that we're all making the same movie. You recently completed a horror film, The Front Room.
Yes.
Which, funny enough, I don't watch horror too much anymore. It scares me. But
funny enough, I don't either. It scares me. It's great to be able to see this one pre-visual effects.
Yeah.
made it a lot easier
Right. Yeah.
for a non-horror buff to take
Yeah.
in.
I don't like. I just don't like that anymore. So, what makes what's different about being a music supervisor on a front room as opposed to say a TV series that you worked on, Empire?
Well, for starters, I should also clarify that I don't really consider the front room to be firmly horror. It always felt more like a psychological suspense kind of story. And so that, you know, completely disregarding your question and talking instead about what the similarities were.
That's fine.
I think, that's something like a drama like Empire and something like a psychological thriller with this have in common is that there's a lot of sort of unsaid, inferred moments where music can really strongly step in and, like tell a part of the story that you don't really want the characters to openly say, but you want this implication. And so that was really fun on both fronts. The front room was very unique in that we were very much coming at it from this one character's perspective. And so that kind of boiled it down and made it a little simpler of like, we didn't have a theme for this character over here and this character over there. We kind of stuck to one and saw her story and her sound get more pervasive as the story progressed. So that was really interesting and that was fun to play with.
I was told that, you experiment with lots of different genres and instrumentations of music to kind of find the perfect soundtrack tone. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, when we first started looking at licensed music for this, we had already picked one song that they wanted to have on set. It wasn't tied to picture, but they wanted to have it to play to help set the tone. And so we really looked at that a lot when we were going into the edit and thinking, like, going back to what I said, like, whose story are we going to pull in through the licensed music? And so we did play with, does this character have a sound? Does this character have a sound? How does that work? We cut stuff in, we, moved stuff around and looked at it all. And then in the end, I think for Max and Sam, for the story they wanted to tell, it was really about the Solange character's presence and her influence on the house as she was there longer and made more of an imprint. And so we went back in the end, we kind of went back to some of that original sound and just sort of the root of what the essence of what made that character scary. Again, without overtly saying it, but they really loved the theremin because, it kind of wobbles. There's just something a little bit like inconsistent about it that makes you feel a little something. You don't want to say it's, like bad, but you can't quite. And that was really sort of, the feeling that the character had too. And so we leaned into that. And, at the end of the day, there was a lot of licensed theremin. There was theremin in the score as well. But it also, like, that alone is such a great, example of the palette that when I went to music sync companies and labels and publishers to collaborate with them on creative ideas, referencing something like the theremin is so great for setting the tone. So we didn't necessarily license songs in every single spot that had the theremin, but when you can use that as a reference point, it really lets people clue in on like, oh, this is the feeling they're going for, and then we can move from there.
That's cool. So along that same line, you mentioned the score, and the score included some theremin in it as well. When you're dealing with music, Katy, like this, and you have a score and you kind of crossed over from the typical music, licensed music to the score, do you have to think about things like, the keys? You came from this piece and you're going into this piece, or does that kind of just hopefully naturally just occur?
I don't really think deeply about that. I'm sure Marcelo thinks all about that and knows all the theory, and he handled that, and that is why I am not a composer. Yeah, that wasn't really, the theory doesn't come into conversation often between me and the directors, because it's usually not the thing that's going to set the emotional tone as much. Or if it is, that's something that I might think of on my own. But again, it's that balance of like, you want to inform and educate directors and editors and everybody on the music side so they understand the context, but I need to also kind of try not to overwhelm them. So getting deep into like this key or we kind of don't get into that. I might take it and go back, go back to when I'm looking for my stuff. I know that, like something that ends on a major chord resolution is going to play better for this juxtaposition or whatever, you know what?
Yeah, sure.
But then at the same time, you could find a song that checks all your boxes and breaks all the rules, and so there's really no, yeah.
No, I like that, and I guess on the if it's bad and they don't go together, you'll notice it pretty quick.
Yes, absolutely.
I was reading your profile a little bit, and you do a few things, but what's the main difference between you as the music soup and you as the person pitching music?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, one that I couldn't have answered when I started in the industry. And over my years on the supervision side, what I realized is that when you're on the supervision side, you are working in the music space, but you're very much on the side of the filmmaker.
Gotcha.
And that takes you away from the artist. So owning a catalog has given me the opportunity to have close personal friends who are artists that I can call up and talk to every week, every day.
Yeah, cool.
And as a music supervisor, you're sort of on the other side of that. So they're roles that interface with each other, but one represents one side of the negotiation and one represents the other side of the negotiation. And so it can be kind of tricky to have a foot on both sides, but I find it super rewarding. I think it is a value add because, you have an insight into both sides that the other wants to know about.
Yeah. I remember, I won't mention names, but I had some friends that were music soups, and they had their own catalogs, and they said, we just just did a film, but the deal with the production company is that I can't use any music out of my catalog. And it is a fairly simple choice. Is it okay to talk about Dawn Patrol?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Well, I would love. Why don't you talk about it then?
Well, Dawn Patrol is my sync roster. So we have, we mostly work with independent artists. And that has been such a challenging yet a rewarding journey to kind of, like I mentioned, get in closer with independent artists and kind of understand their struggles within the music industry, because we do have this huge machine, and you see the divide get greater and greater between, what a major can do for someone versus what an independent person can do for themselves. And so that's been really fascinating to kind of look at different people who are all trying to make it themselves in their own way and kind of figure out, what do they really need help with or insights on? What can I do? And how can we go out and make money together? Which is a much harder question to answer, but
I have a little question about that. Well, I think I think it's wonderful. I looked all through your website, and I think what you do is really cool. I also noticed that you offer other services to musicians, like social marketing and what was the other thing? And career coaching, which I do some of myself. And I just want to tell you that you do what I preach, right?
Which is
Maintain multiple revenue streams. If you're a musician, don't put all your eggs in that basket, unless you are, a surviving Paul McCartney or somebody, so you're doing exactly the right thing. And
and that's
awesome.
That's actually something we just started. It's been a very soft launch. I was really fortunate enough to start working with someone else part-time who has a marketing background, and she was doing some of our just straight pitching to music supervisors, doing some of the email marketing for that. And we were talking, and again, going back to, I have so many artists on the roster now who, even though they do everything very, very differently, there are some commonalities between a lot of the stories and struggles that I hear from people who are trying to do it independent, probably trying to do it as a part-time thing because they have to make money from somewhere else. And so one of the things I really wanted to do is kind of expand in a way that's sort of a la carte, almost like, what are labels doing for artists that really help? And, if somebody already has their social media handled, then what else do they need help with? And how, so people can kind of pick and choose, like, this I'm really great at, I don't need help with, I can handle that myself, but this I could use some assistance with, so I'm gonna engage with Dawn Patrol in this capacity. And so just kind of trying to, I try and go back to a lot of activists have really inspired me to think about the music industry in a completely new way, and think less about, like, well, what does the model look like, and how can I do a version of that? Sure. And more just completely throw our preconceived knowledge of that and everything that we've learned out the window, start from a blank canvas and dream into existence how you want it to look. And I find that so challenging to, like, turn off everything that I've learned about the music industry in the last 15 years and go, like, if we start from scratch, which piece of this do we keep and which piece of this do we completely reimagine? But I mean, I love that challenge too. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do here, is like, how can we just have, like, music, and because artists too, like, so much of what you do now is post to social media, which requires a visual element. So it's very interesting to, in the capacity as a music supervisor, find music for a visual project, whereas in the capacity of working more with artists, it's like we start with the audio, and then how do we build visuals around that? So it's really interesting, and really, I learn something new every day, which is what my goal in life is. So
that's cool. I can hear your passion in that.
Another thing very bad at keeping it at bay when I start.
No, I think you go, because I won't talk about it very much, but I would say that most musicians, even like myself when I was a composer, and I was very good at writing music, and that's what I love to do. Marketing it, that's wait a minute, that's business, and of course it is the music business. But even with this podcast, I just partnered with my old partner, who has a big marketing firm in Boston, to help me. I said, it's doing very well, but I know that there are not many people that do what I do. So I want to get it out there as much as possible. I can't move on without asking you about another passion of yours, rock climbing. Tell me about it.
I love all things outdoors and adventure sports. I feel a little bit like a poser talking just about rock climbing because I tore my ACL skiing 3 years ago. And I was
Yeah.
climbing very regularly before that, but then you have to take time off and recuperate and do PT and everything. And so that's something I'm still challenging myself to come
Hmm.
back from fully. But yeah, I love being outdoors. I have an SUV that I converted into a camper. So
Oh,
I just,
nice.
I spent this whole last week in Alabama hills, just boondocking in
You're a
the
mountain girl.
hills.
Okay. I love it.
So yeah, any chance that I can get to incorporate outdoor adventure and everyday life. I took calls for the front room from the mountains in Colorado
Uh-huh.
because they called me and were like, hey, we need to do a really deep dive into this section and we need to do it next week. And I was like, well, that's great, but I have a 10-day road trip through Colorado planned. I'm going to have internet. So
Yeah.
as long as you don't mind that I'm doing it from the mountains, I don't mind. So yeah, any opportunity to kind of incorporate outdoor adventure or just being in nature into work, and the dream would be to work on like a Jimmy Chin project that is, the film is about that too.
I ask everybody this question because I'm putting together a series about AI and music.
Okay,
Where do you think it's going?
I think it's going to be a really interesting tool. I have some people on the roster now who say that they use it for mixing and mastering,
Hmm.
which is something I never thought of until they mentioned it. I think in sync specifically, we already have a lot of, we've sort of bottomed out the fees.
Hmm.
We have a lot of production library music
Hmm.
companies who are getting music from people who aren't making it from a place of passion,
Yeah.
and they're charging very little for it and they're getting the back end royalty streaming, right, the royalty income. And so I think we've already kind of had to have this push in the music
Hmm.
industry where we have to say, like, if you care about music and musicians and this form of art, you have to put money behind it. Yes, you can find cheaper alternatives, but don't you want to support the musicians?
Yes.
And so, in that sense, I think we've already been fighting that fight.
Mm.
I think those companies that are trying to already bottom out the fees in sync,
Hmm.
I think they're at more risk
Yes.
of having AI be threatening to their business model and those folks over there than something like my company, which is trying to push independent artists who have a perspective, who have a story to tell.
Hmm.
We're already on that mission. We're already
Hmm.
on that track trying to get people to value the human contribution.
I wanted to just end with one question, and I end every podcast with this question because I love talking with you. You've been in the business. You have a really great perspective. Is there any advice or learning that you could pass on to somebody that's maybe looking at what you do, or just general advice about the industry?
The advice I wish I had, I probably did get it and I didn't listen, but what I really try and hammer home is that it is so much about your network. The
Mm.
better you get at networking, the faster in an authentic way and like
Hmm.
keeping those connections fresh. There's so many people who I met 10 years ago that I wish I was still in touch with, and I feel so awkward about reaching back out to,
Mm.
just constantly, finding new people and then keeping the people who you've collected along the way fresh. That I feel is the biggest make or break thing. And so that's my advice. Start early, do it often, don't let them go cold.
Love that. Thank you, Katie. This has been a real pleasure. I wish you all the
It's a pleasure to
success
be
in the
here.
world in the future. Yeah, and maybe I'll meet you rock climbing. I'm only kidding.
Yes.
You have a great day, and I hope to get to talk to you again.